Josh, I know that you've been following these developments closely. I know that you work there in the Fulton County Courthouse half the time. What more can you tell us about what is happening down there and when we can expect an announcement? Could we still receive one today?
Yeah, it has been about as an exciting a day as anybody can remember down in Fulton County. Earlier today, as we were just told, there was this release by the clerk's office, and it listed 39 counts and very clearly had Donald J. Trump at the top of it. It was a docket set summary, and everybody was not expecting that. So everybody grabbed onto it, and the machine started up. Then that story was retracted. The clerk erased that information off of the public record, but it was already out there. Then these witnesses, there were 4 witnesses that we knew because they'd acknowledged their subpoenas publicly were going to be brought in. And that's Bean Nguyen, Jen Jordan, George Cheedy, and Jeff Duncan. However, there are other individuals such as Mr. Gabe Sterling, who is a very highly placed election official that also has been down at the Fulton County Courthouse. And after being told to show up tomorrow, Jeff Duncan and George Cheedy were called in late today. And we don't understand exactly what changed, if anything, whether this was planned or whether this is in response to what appears to be an inadvertent disclosure of this docket summary form. But I do know that Mr. Cheedy and Mr. Duncan right now, or at least about 10 minutes ago, were sitting next to each other in the grand jury assembly area talking about, according to Mr. Cheedy, everything but the actual case. And these are 2 gentlemen that come from very disparate parts of our political universe. Jeff Duncan being the elected lieutenant governor who decided not to pursue his current public service because of Trump, has been very much a post-Trump GOP thought leader as Governor Kemp continues his political career. Meanwhile, George Cheedy, long-established journalist who in the last several years has become one of the leading independent journalists in the state of Georgia.
And you had mentioned that there were 2 other witnesses who entered that courthouse today. What more can you tell us about them, Josh?
Bean Nguyen and Jen Jordan are both elected officials, or were. Jen Jordan ran for Attorney General. Bean Nguyen ran for, Secretary of State, and Bean Nguyen ran, I'm trying to remember exact, but they're well-known politicians, political stakeholders, thought leaders here in Georgia. They were witness to what happened during the discussion over the legitimacy of the election, the so-called fake elector issue that happened in our Georgia State House, which resulted in a meeting, an allegedly secret meeting that George Cheedy then interrupted. And his testimony about the secrecy of that meeting really was the impetus for a lot of the allegations being made specific to Georgia. That's where Rudy Giuliani comes in, because that meeting was predicated based on some of the testimony and information Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and other national Republicans had really brought to Georgia and were leaning on Georgia hard to do something. Georgia is one of the 5 states that, according to other investigations, the Trump candidate, or the Trump campaign, the Trump administration had noted were states that they were going to make a play for in an effort to, depending on who you trust, either steal the election or show how the election had been stolen. This is all moving very quickly. We may see an indictment in a few minutes. We may see an indictment in a few hours, especially since that jury was asked to stay for dinner, or we may not see an indictment until tomorrow. I think DA Willis's plans were interrupted today by somebody, somehow, and things are very much in flux.
All right, good to know that the grand jury was asked to stay for dinner. Let's go ahead and drill down into some of the charges that the former president could be facing here. What are your thoughts, and will we see other charges as well for potential co-defendants?
That's what we're all waiting to hear, is what's the scope and breadth of this investigation. Fani Willis has the ultimate and sole authority to determine what charges she wants to bring. She has the mandate. She is the elected district attorney. She is the highest constitutional charging officer in Fulton County, which is the site, nexus, and venue for these allegations. Everything from the Donald Trump call to Brad Raffensperger urging him to find the 11,000 votes, through the organization of the meetings allegedly put together in order to create an alternate raft of delegates to support Donald Trump if the election was going to be contested. There's a lot of allegations about crime and fraud with that. Then we get into the Coffee County issue. In Coffee County, Georgia, under the auspices and direct orders of some people very highly placed in the Trump organization, the Trump administration, there are strong allegations about malfeasance and fraud related to third-party private organizations coming in, accessing voting machines, sharing information, potentially manipulating information. And then, of course, in all of these multiple issues is the cover-up, the lies. As bad as something is or wasn't, it is more often easy for the state to show fraud and crime in the cover-up, in the response to these allegations, and that lack of candor, that specifically hiding other people's criminal intent and actions and self-preservation, that creates criminal liability for public servants and private individuals. We could see well over 20 people named, and it looks like, according to that initial filing, 39 different charges.
39 different charges. All right. So you've gone ahead and you've laid out some of them. And one that has come up time and time again is racketeering, or a RICO law. Explain to us exactly what this is and how Fani Willis might use it in this case.
Racketeering, and it's for corrupt organizations, and it's actually kind of an old law that was made very much in vogue in the 70s when a young federal prosecutor named Rudy Giuliani in New York resuscitated some of these older laws and used them to attack organized crime. All the big mob cases in the 70s, 80s, and 90s were predicated on federal RICO charges. Racketeering and corrupt organizations is a way of adding additional powers of prosecution for groups or organizations combined in a criminal enterprise, making them all equally responsible and adding tremendous pressure to the witnesses.
And I wanted to circle back, Josh, to something that Ardell Walters was talking about earlier, which is this is different from the other cases that Trump is dealing with right now, because this is a state case. These would be state charges. Take us through what the differences would be and how they could impact the former president.
So there are two separate criminal systems in America: the federal system run by the federal government, with the Department of Justice being the primary prosecuting agency. Then our states each have the ability to retain original jurisdiction on charges not already handled by the federal government. That can include concurrent charges for concurrent frauds, which is why you can face state and federal charges for the same actions. But the state laws are going to be governed by the state laws, the state constitution. States can give you more rights than the federal constitution. States can give you different privileges and defenses. And that's what President Trump is going to face here. Georgia is traditionally a strong pro-prosecution state, and the state version of our RICO laws, not the federal version, we took those and customized them for Georgia. We have made them stronger in some ways than the federal laws. That's going to allow Fani Willis a massive advantage in putting the squeeze on lower level individuals potentially involved in this allegedly fraudulent organization or fraudulent plan. It'll be fascinating to see how she uses that pressure to get evidence against the people higher up in the alleged conspiracy.
All right, criminal defense attorney Joshua Schiffer, thank you so much for your time. Stand by, don't go too far. We're still waiting to see if we see an indictment come from that Fulton County courthouse tonight. I'm Veronica Dela Cruz. We're going to take a quick break right here.